The rope scratched against her throat like a promise of death. Clara Whitman stood on the rough wooden platform behind the general store, her hands tied, her torn wedding dress covered in prairie dust. 30 townsfolk from Cedar Ridge stood below, faces tight with judgment. The morning sun burned down, and the wind carried the smell of dry earth and fear. Her mother-in-law, Esther Whitman, stood in front of the crowd, clutching a black shawl around her shoulders like armor. "She poisoned my boy," Esther shouted. "Fed him mercury in his coffee, week after week. Slow, deliberate, just like a snake." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Someone spat into the dirt. Clara opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. What was the point? They'd already made up their minds. The so-called trial had lasted 30 minutes inside the saloon. Esther had shown a small vial of mercury, claiming she found it hidden in Clara's hope chest. No one asked how she'd gotten the key to that chest. No one wondered why Clara would keep proof of her own guilt. "Thomas trusted her," Esther said, voice shaking with anger. "Brought her into our home, gave her his name, and she killed him." Clara closed her eyes and lifted her chin, letting the sun warm her face one last time. Thomas had been sick for months, fevered, weak, unable to keep food down. She'd nursed him day and night, spooning broth into his mouth, wiping his forehead, praying he'd live. She loved him. Even when his family treated her like an outsider, she'd stayed. "Any last words, murderer?" Esther's voice was sharp. Clara opened her eyes and met her gaze. "I didn't kill him." "Of course you'd say that." Esther nodded to her remaining son, Jacob, who stood beside the platform holding the rope. "Do it," she said. The crowd went still. Even the wind seemed to stop. Jacob's hand trembled. Clara saw the doubt in his eyes. He'd always been kinder than the rest. But blood loyalty ran deep in the Whitman family. Then came the sound of hoofbeats, fast, steady, growing louder. A rider appeared at the end of the street. He was tall, lean, with silver streaks in his dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. The crowd stepped back as he dismounted and walked forward. "What's the rush?" he called out. "Seems like you're fixing to hang someone without proper process." "Ain't your concern, stranger," Esther snapped. "This woman murdered my son. We're serving justice." The man studied Clara for a moment, then faced the crowd. "Name's Marshall Kane, out of Dodge City," he said, showing a silver badge that gleamed in the sunlight. "And hanging's my business when there's no due process. Mind telling me what proof you've got?" Esther laughed nervously. She was the only one with him when he died. "I found mercury in her things. What more do you need?" "A fair trial," Kane said. "A jury that ain't made of kinfolk. Maybe a doctor's report on the body." "When did your son die, ma'am?" 2 weeks ago, Esther said quickly. "We buried him proper." "That's convenient," Kane said. He stepped closer to the platform. "Miss, you got anything to say?" Clara's voice came out soft, but clear. "Thomas was sick for months. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I begged him to see a doctor in Dodge, but his mother said it was too costly." "Lies!" Esther hissed. "Let her talk," Kane said firmly. Clara swallowed. "I found him collapsed in the barn one morning. By sundown, he was gone. I loved my husband, Marshall. I'd never harm him." The crowd shifted uneasily. Jacob's grip on the rope loosened. "Mercury poisoning," Kane said, thinking aloud. "That's a cruel way to die. Takes weeks. Real painful." He looked at Esther. "You say you found this mercury in her hope chest? Under her wedding dress?" "Yes," Esther said. "And you had the key to that chest?" It wasn't locked," she stammered. "Strange," Kane said. "Most women keep those locked. Especially when their in-laws don't care for them." The crowd murmured again. Doubt was spreading. Esther's face tightened. "This is our town," she said. "Our justice. You've got no right." "I've got every right," Cain cut in. His hand rested on his holster. "This woman's coming with me to Dodge for a real trial." "The hell she is!" Jacob barked. "She killed my brother." "Did she?" Cain asked quietly. "Or did someone just tell you that?" Jacob's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking between his mother and Clara. Before he could answer, another voice called out. "Marshal Cain." The crowd parted, and Sheriff Briggs walked forward. Stocky, red-faced, his badge dull with dust. "Didn't expect to see you letting lynch law run wild," Cain said. "It ain't lynch law when it's justice," Briggs said. "She's guilty. Everyone knows it. Ride on, Marshal. This ain't your jurisdiction. Murder's a federal crime," Cain said. "Crosses territorial lines. That makes it my jurisdiction." The air grew tense. The crowd pressed in. Clara could see it coming, violence, quick and bloody. Cain was alone, outnumbered 20-1. Even his calm eyes showed strain. Then his voice softened. "Before you boys start shooting, maybe ask yourselves why Esther Whitman's so eager to hang this woman. Maybe she's afraid of what Clara might say if she ever reached a real courtroom." The words hit like thunder. Esther's face went pale. "How dare you," she snapped. "I've seen this before," Cain said. "Grieving family, easy target, quick justice. Usually means someone's hiding something." "String them both up," a man shouted. Hands reached for guns. The crowd stirred restlessly. Cain moved slowly, reaching into his vest pocket. "Before we start killing folks," he said, "maybe take a look at this." He pulled out a folded letter, yellowed with age. "Came to me last month from a doctor in Denver. Says he treated a young man named Thomas Whitman about 6 months ago." The crowd fell silent. Esther's color drained away. Cain opened the paper and read, "Patient shows signs of mercury exposure. Advised to stop mercury-based treatments. Mother insisted on continuing home remedies despite warning." Esther swayed on her feet. Cain looked up. Mercury-based medicines were popular with folks who didn't trust doctors. Old remedies, passed down in families. "You used them, didn't you, ma'am?" Esther's lips trembled. "It was supposed to make him strong. My mother used it. Her mother before her. I didn't know," her voice broke. "I didn't know it would kill him." A heavy silence fell. The truth hung in the air like smoke. Cain folded the letter carefully. "Your son died from poison, ma'am. But not the kind you think. You gave it to him yourself, out of ignorance, not hate. And now you nearly killed your daughter-in-law trying to hide it." Jacob's face twisted in pain. "Ma, tell me it's not true." Esther looked at him, then at the noose around Clara's neck. Her shoulders sagged. "I killed my boy," she whispered. "Oh God, I killed my Thomas." She fell to her knees, sobbing. Clara felt tears streaming down her face, not for herself, but for the broken woman below. For Thomas. For all the pain that could have been avoided with a little trust, a little mercy. Jacob untied the rope with shaking hands. The crowd began to drift away, their excitement replaced with shame. Sheriff Briggs stared at the ground, beaten by the truth. Marshal Cain helped Clara down. His touch was steady and kind. "You all right, ma'am?" She nodded weakly. "How did you know?" "Got word about a hanging without trial," he said. "Did some checking in Denver. Found the doctor. The rest was just watching who shouted loudest for your death." He looked at Esther, still weeping in the dirt. Guilty folks are usually the loudest accusers. Jacob knelt beside his mother, holding her as she cried. The Whitman family was shattered. But maybe, someday, it could heal. What happens now? Clara asked. Now you're free, Kane said. You've got no reason to stay here. Might be time to start over somewhere new. Clara looked around at Cedar Ridge, the town that had nearly killed her. There was nothing left for her now. But for the first time in months, she felt something like hope. Marshal Kane, she said softly. Thank you. For believing in truth when no one else would. He tipped his hat. Sometimes that's all it takes, one person asking the right questions. He mounted his horse and rode away, dust trailing behind him. Clara gathered her few belongings and walked west, toward the setting sun and whatever waited beyond. Behind her, Esther Whitman wept for the son she had killed with misguided love, and for the daughter-in-law she had nearly destroyed. Years later, Clara would remember that morning not as the day she almost died, but as the day she was reborn. She would find a new life in California, remarry, and raise children who would never know how close they came to not existing. But she would never forget the stranger who stood up for her when the world turned against her, or the lesson that truth, no matter how painful, was always worth fighting for. And as the desert wind swept across Cedar Ridge, it carried away the dust, the guilt, and the ghost of the woman Clara used to be.